Welcome to tonight's sleep story. Let's drift into a soothing story together as you begin your journey into a restful and rejuvenating sleep. As the first gust of wind swept through the trees, the sky darkened and the storm began its approach. The air was thick with the anticipation of change, the clouds gathering like a gathering army, ready to claim the sky. The protagonist, a humble stork, stood at the edge of a vast forest, the tips of its feathers ruffling in the wind. It knew without a doubt that this storm wasn't just a natural phenomenon, it was a signal, a call for something greater. That the stork had lived a life of simplicity, flying from place to place, carrying messages of hope and life. The wind had always been a constant companion, guiding its journey across the vast lands. But today, the wind felt different. It whispered with urgency, urging the stork to go beyond its usual routes, to venture into uncharted territory. The forest in front of it seemed to hold its breath, the trees standing tall and silent, waiting for something to unfold. The stork had always followed the wind, trusting it to guide its path. But today, the wind felt more compelling, almost like a force pushing it forward. It took a deep breath, the air charged with electricity, and spread its wings. As it soared into the sky, it felt the storm surrounding it, an energy that seemed to stir the air and bend the world around it. The journey ahead was unknown, but the stork felt an unshakable certainty that it had a purpose greater than just flying from one place to another, carrying messages from point A to point B. It was being called to something deeper, a mission that went beyond its own understanding. The sky seemed to stretch on forever, and the stork felt as if it were being pulled into a different world. The clouds swirled around it as if they were guiding it, showing the way. It was as if the storm itself had become its companion, a force that carried it forward, making each flap of its wings feel like a step in an ancient unfolding journey. The storm wasn't just a physical event, it was a metaphor, a manifestation of the stork's inner conflict, its longing to understand its place in the world. As the wind howled and the rain began to fall, the stork pushed forward, trusting that this storm would lead it to where it needed to be. With each beat of its wings, the stork felt closer to the unknown. There was a certain calm that washed over it, despite the turbulence around it. The storm wasn't a force to be feared, it was something to embrace. Something that would carry it to its destiny. Dot in the distance, the stork saw the outline of a distant land, a place it had never visited before. It felt a pull toward it, an inner calling that seemed to come from the very earth beneath its wings. This was the beginning of a new chapter, a journey that would take the stork into uncharted territories, both externally and internally. Storm was not just a storm, it was the gateway to something greater, something the stork had been waiting for its entire life. And as the winds picked up, the stork knew that it was no longer just flying to deliver a message. It was flying toward discovery, toward its true purpose, toward the realization that it had been called not just to travel the world, but to bring something far more precious, something that could change everything. The wind began to settle, and the storm, as quickly as it had arrived, started to calm. The forest below the Stork, once shrouded in darkness and mist, now opened up to reveal a quiet landscape wide. Tranquil fields dotted with wildflowers, towering trees, and winding rivers. The soft light of the dawning sun bathed everything in a gentle golden hue. It was as though the world itself was awakening, greeting the Stork as it moved further into unknown territory. But despite the calm, the Stork could feel a sense of unease lingering in the air. The path ahead was still unclear, even though the physical journey seemed peaceful. The sound of rustling leaves echoed faintly, and there was a stillness that felt unnatural, as if nature itself was waiting for something. The Stork flapped its wings once, breaking the silence, but it felt an odd tension in the air. Something was missing. The landscape before it was vast, but it lacked the vibrancy it had once felt in the forest it called home. As the Stork flew deeper, it noticed a shadowy figure in the distance, a glimpse of movement between the trees, just on the edge of its vision. Instinctively, the Stork's body tensed, but it pushed the feeling aside. This was the journey it had chosen, and it was determined to continue. Yet, as it moved forward, it couldn't shake the sense that the path ahead was not one it had walked before, not one that could be simply followed. The Stork soon found itself hovering over a wide stream, its surface reflecting the sky above, but moving with an unpredictable current. The water was clear but turbulent, its flow quick and determined, like the winds that had guided it thus far. The stream was an obstacle, but it wasn't an insurmountable one. It wasn't the water itself that challenged the Stork. It was the fact that the Stork had no clear idea how to cross it. It could fly over the water, but the current below seemed to mock its efforts, swift and unyielding. The Stork hesitated, unsure. Would it be able to continue its journey by simply crossing over, or would the path ahead require something more? For the first time since setting out, the Stork wasn't sure of what lay ahead. The certainty it had once felt was beginning to fade, replaced with the nagging question of what comes next. In the distance, the Stork saw another bird gliding gracefully over the stream. The bird's movements were smooth, confident, and full of purpose. It seemed to have no hesitation, no doubt. The Stork watched, mesmerized, as the bird easily crossed the stream without even a flutter of concern. The Stork, though filled with admiration, still felt a growing sense of doubt. Why did it feel so uncertain, so lost? The wind shifted slightly, and with it, the Stork's awareness sharpened. It realized that the path it had followed thus far wasn't just a physical journey, it was about learning to trust itself. The bird's effortless crossing of the stream wasn't a sign that it should simply follow. It was a sign that it too could find its own way across if it trusted itself, just as the bird had. "Trust your wings," whispered a voice, its own voice, faint but clear. The Stork recognized the tone, the familiarity of it. It had heard this whisper many times before, but never so strongly, never so certain. The voice was not external, it was the Stork's own intuition, its deeper self-awareness. Taking a deep breath, the Stork began its approach. It had no map, no clear guide. But it had learned the most important lesson of all. It didn't need to know exactly how the journey would unfold. The key was to trust the inner light that had guided it so far. With that understanding, the stork spread its wings, flying toward the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. As it crossed the stream, it didn't focus on the turbulent waters below, but on the steady rhythm of its wings, on the current of the air that carried it. It was in that moment, mid-flight, that the stork realized that it didn't need to fear the stream. It was simply another part of its journey. It was just another step forward in a path that had no end. And in that realization, the stork felt an inner peace, knowing that it could face whatever challenges came next, as long as it trusted itself. The stork's wings beat steadily, the rhythmic sound of the air parting beneath them filling the otherwise silent forest. The stream was now behind, but the journey ahead felt unfolding, vast, and full of unknown possibilities. The stork had felt a shift, a deeper confidence had taken root within it, though still fragile, like the first buds of spring breaking through the frozen soil. As the stork continued its flight, the forest around it seemed to open up. The trees were more spaced out now, giving way to wide meadows, bathed in the gentle light of the rising sun. The air had cleared, and though it was still early morning, the warmth of the sun was palpable against the stork's feathers, making it feel as if the day itself was a gift, waiting to be unwrapped. There was something deeply satisfying about the silence now. The storm had passed, but in its wake, the stork found that it had developed a new sense of clarity. It wasn't the loudness of the wind anymore, nor the force of the storm. It was a quiet knowing, a confidence that emanated from within. The forest that once seemed like an imposing labyrinth had now turned into a space full of possibilities, inviting the stork to explore. The stork's focus shifted, and instead of looking ahead at the path, it allowed itself to feel the air moving around it. There was a subtle vibration in the wind, as if the entire landscape were alive, breathing with it. The wind had been its guide, but now it was something deeper, a quiet force from within, carrying it forward with gentle persistence. It was no longer merely being pulled along by forces beyond its control. It was flying with purpose, with intention. At that moment, the stork remembered the voice that had whispered earlier, that inner guidance that had told it to trust its wings. It felt like an echo now, resonating in the core of its being. Trust your wings, it repeated to itself. The words felt like an affirmation, like a promise. The stork wasn't just following the wind. It was creating its own path, carving out a space for itself in the vastness of the world. The land stretched out below, and the possibilities were endless, but now the stork was not afraid. It was aware of its power, its agency in this journey. The stork's wings, now familiar with the rhythm of flight, moved effortlessly through the air. Each beat felt purposeful, as if the very wind that cradled its feathers was now an old friend, gently urging it forward. There was a deep peace that had settled in the stork's heart, a growing sense of trust in the path ahead. The uncertainty that once clouded its thoughts had dissipated, replaced by a quiet confidence that whatever lay ahead, it would be able to face it Dot as the stork flew. It noticed something new. There was a glow in the distance, faint but unmistakable. It wasn't the harsh light of the sun, nor was it the soft shimmer of the stars. It was a glow that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the forest, as if the trees themselves were alive, pulsing with a secret energy. The stork felt an overwhelming sense of curiosity draw it closer, and without thinking, it adjusted its course toward the glowing light. The forest grew denser as the stork approached. The light, the trees seeming to part just enough to allow it through. The air felt cooler here, but there was something magnetic about the place of force that beckoned it forward. As the stork landed in the clearing, it felt the ground beneath its feet shift, the earth softer than before, as if welcoming it too. This sacred place, Dot, in the center of the clearing, stood a single tree, taller and more majestic than any the stork had seen. Its trunk was wide, its branches reaching high into the sky. The tree shimmered with an inner light, and at its base, nestled in the roots, was a small, delicate flower glowing softly. The flower's petals shimmered with a spectrum of colors. Its beauty beyond anything the stork had ever witnessed. Dot, the stork approached the flower, feeling a deep sense of reverence. It knelt near the flower, its feathers brushing the soft grass beneath it. There was an unspoken connection, a recognition that this flower, this place, held something sacred, something that the stork had been unknowingly seeking all along. It felt as though the flower was not just a symbol of beauty, but a symbol of the journey itself. A reminder that even in the smallest moments, the world was filled with magic and meaning. Dot, as the stork sat by the flower, a soft breeze blew through the branches of the tree, carrying with it the whispers of the forest. The stork felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over it, and it understood now that this was not just a moment of discovery. It was a moment of transformation. The stork had come to the heart of the forest, to the place where all paths converged, where the answers it sought were waiting. The flower, radiant in the stillness of the clearing, was a symbol of new beginnings and the endless cycle of life. The stork closed its eyes for a moment, allowing the energy of the place to fill it. It felt the pulse of the earth beneath it, the rhythm of the world flowing through its wings. It was as if it had become part of the forest, part of the cycle of life that moved through every leaf, every blade of grass. There was no longer a separation between the stork and the world around it. It was one with the earth, with the sky, with a flower at its feet. Dot, in that moment, the stork understood the truth it had been seeking all along. The journey was never about reaching a final destination. It was about the experience, the connection, and the transformation that occurred along the way. The stork didn't need to know where the path would lead. It only needed to continue walking, flying, and trusting that every step, every flap of its wings, was part of a greater purpose. Dot, the stork stood up and stretched its wings, feeling the weight of its wings lift it with ease. It didn't know where it would go next, but it felt at peace with the journey. It was ready, now more than ever, to continue exploring, knowing that the true magic was in the experience of living, of moving through the world with purpose, trust, and an open heart. Dot, with one last glance at the shimmering flower, The stork took off into the sky once more, the wind beneath its wings propelling it forward into the unknown. The forest, the trees, and the flower all seemed to whisper their approval, as though the journey had just begun, and the stork had found its true path. The stork soared higher, its wings gliding effortlessly through the cool air. The horizon, before it stretched out, an endless expanse of soft blues and greens, the warmth of the rising sun enveloping its feathers. For the first time in a long while, the stork felt a deep, unshakable sense of peace, a peace that was not merely about the stillness around it, but about the stillness within. The clouds parted before it as if the world was opening itself up, inviting the stork to move deeper into the unknown. With trust in its wings and the path ahead dot as it flew through the air, the stork became aware of something else, something subtle but undeniable. The wind, which had once seemed like a force to be resisted, was now a companion, a silent guide that whispered encouragement, lifting it higher and further. It wasn't just the physical act of flying anymore. It was the feeling of being in harmony with the environment, in perfect sync with the world around it. The stork felt its heart expand as it soared higher, knowing that each gust of wind wasn't simply carrying it. It was also revealing more of the world. The fields below appeared endless, a patchwork of textures and colors that made the world feel vast, infinite. Yet, for the first time, the stork didn't feel small within that vastness. It was as if, by following its own path, it had found its rightful place in the grand landscape. The journey was still long, the destination still far from sight, but the stork didn't need to look ahead anymore. It trusted the wind, trusted its wings, trusted that each beat of its wings was leading it exactly where it needed to go. It had become one with the wind, its movements flowing in natural rhythm with the environment. Soon, the stork saw a mountain range in the distance, the peaks rising majestically toward the sky, their tips kissed by the first rays of sunlight. The stork approached the mountains, their immense beauty drawing it closer. The land below was sparse now, the fields replaced by rocky outcrops and sparse vegetation. The air was cooler here, the wind stronger, but the stork felt no fear. It had embraced the challenges before it. Each mountain, each gust of wind was just another step on the path of discovery. Asterisk as the stork flew closer to the mountains, it found a small valley nestled between the peaks. The valley was peaceful, a quiet haven filled with the sound of running water, the scent of pine, and the sight of delicate wildflowers. The stork descended into the valley, its wings folding gently at its sides as it landed by the riverbank. A moment, it simply stood there, taking in the beauty around it. The sun was now fully risen, casting its light over the valley in a soft golden hue. The stork could feel the energy of this place, the way the land seemed to pulse with life, the way the river whispered secrets to the earth. It was a place of peace, a moment of stillness before the next step. The stork approached the river, dipping its beak into the cool water. The river, much like the wind, had become a companion, its flow constant, yet always moving forward, never stagnant. The stork realized that the river, like the wind, was a reminder that the journey was always moving, always evolving. The water didn't rush, it moved with purpose, a steady flow that had always been its way. The stork was learning, just as the river had learned, to trust the current of its journey. The stork closed its eyes, allowing the soft sounds of the river and the gentle rustling of the leaves to surround it. It wasn't about where it would go next, nor about the obstacles it would face. It was about the present moment, about experiencing the journey as it unfolded. The journey had no end, only continuous steps, and the stork knew that it would continue, always guided by the wind, and the river always learning and growing. The stork continued to fly, its wings cutting through the cool morning air with ease. The valley it had landed in felt like a sanctuary, a place where the noise of the world had been replaced by the soft murmur of the river and the occasional rustling of leaves. The stork was aware of the quiet, of how everything seemed to have slowed down around it. There were no distractions, no looming fears of the unknown. The world was simply here in this moment, and the stork was part of it. It began to understand something deeper: silence. It had always been surrounded by sounds, the rustle of the trees, the call of distant birds, the hum of the wind. But now the stork felt the absence of noise, the absence of hurry. It wasn't about the next destination or the task to complete or the obstacles to face. It was about being. The stork realized that silence wasn't emptiness, it was presence. It was a way of connecting with the world without needing to chase it, to force it into motion. Silence allowed space for the world to speak to it, for the stork to listen as it perched on a rock by the river. The stork closed its eyes for a moment, feeling the gentle breeze against its feathers. The stillness allowed its thoughts to settle, its emotions to quiet. It could hear the heartbeat of the land, the pulse of the earth beneath its feet. The river flowed steadily, a silent guide, showing the stork that life wasn't about rushing forward, it was about flowing with the current, taking each moment as it came, accepting what was and trusting the journey. The stork opened its eyes again, and for the first time, it truly saw the landscape. It had always observed the world from a distance, flying above it, looking down at it. But now it was present, fully in tune with the earth. The trees, the flowers, the river, they were all part of the same cycle, the same flow. The stork was no longer separate from the land. It was part of it, part of something much bigger than itself. The stork could feel a deep, humbling connection to the earth. It wasn't just flying to a destination. It was learning to become part of the journey. Each beat of its wings, each breath it took, was a step deeper into understanding. It could feel the pulse of the world in its bones, a rhythm that matched the quiet whispers of the river. The stork realized that it wasn't the goal that mattered, it was the experience, the feeling of being alive, of being present in every moment for a moment. The stork wondered if the journey had been about this all along, not about the challenges or the final destination, but about the moments of silence and stillness in between. The times when everything stopped, when the noise of the world faded and there was only the now. The stork had always looked ahead, chasing the wind, the skies, the horizons, that now it understood that the journey itself was a destination. Every moment of peace, every quiet whisper of the wind, every fleeting second of connection was a gift. The stork stood up from its perch and took a deep breath. It felt grounded, rooted to the earth in a way it had never felt before. It didn't need to fly faster, farther, or higher. It didn't need to hurry anymore. The world would reveal itself to the stork in its own time. And in the silence, the stork knew it could move at its own pace. Trusting that each moment was enough, the stork lifted off the ground once more, its wings stretching wide as it took to the sky, the wind beneath it now gentle and guiding. The sunlight had softened, casting a golden hue over the landscape, and the stork felt as though the world was embracing it, the horizon welcoming it to a place of understanding, calm, and purpose. As it soared higher, the stork noticed the clouds ahead, large, soft puffs moving slowly across the sky. They were not ominous, but rather inviting, as if part of the world was beckoning the stork forward. The stork followed the clouds, flying effortlessly toward them, its feathers ruffling in the soft breeze. The air was crisp but not cold, and the stork felt light in its flight, as if every motion was fluid and effortless. The clouds formed a pathway, not a barrier, and the stork had no hesitation as it glided through them. The moment felt timeless, as if the world had stilled just for the stork to move through this space. Unhurried and free dot, as the stork passed through the clouds, a sense of contentment washed over it. The light within the clouds was soft and gentle, and the stork felt it permeate its very being. There was no rush, no need to hurry or chase after the next destination. It was as if, in this moment, the journey had come full circle, and the stork was simply existing within the beauty and peace of the world, without the pressure to move forward. The clouds embraced it like old friends, wrapping the stork in their soft, gentle arms. For the first time, the stork understood what the journey was truly about. It wasn't about the destination or the milestones along the way. It was about the moment, the space in between, where the stork could simply exist and experience everything around it. The clouds were a reflection of the stork's inner state, soft and fluid, without any sharp edges or boundaries. The stork could see the world around it with clear eyes, no longer clouded by doubt or fear, but with a sense of balance that had come from the journey itself. As the stork flew deeper into the clouds, it felt a shift in the air, a subtle change that made the world feel even more still. The clouds became thicker, wrapping around it like a cozy blanket, the air soft and warm. There was a quiet hum in the atmosphere, like the world was vibrating in harmony, and the stork felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, like it was exactly where it was meant to be. There were no questions, no uncertainties, just a profound sense of peace and connection with the world around it. The stork continued to soar through the clouds, taking in the silence and stillness that surrounded it. It no longer needed to look for signs or answers. Everything was unfolding as it should. The journey itself was the answer, and the stork understood now that it didn't need to search for meaning in the destination. It was in the experience of moving, of flying, of existing. It was in the moments of stillness that it could feel the pulse of life in every beat of its wings, in every gust of wind, in the soft whispers of the clouds dot in this quiet space. The stork realized that it had become one with the journey, not a passive participant, but an active creator of its own path. The clouds no longer symbolized obstacles or challenges to overcome. They had become a part of its journey, part of its growth. The stork's wings were no longer just tools for travel. They were a symbol of the freedom it had found, the freedom to move through life with grace and confidence, trusting in the process as the stork slowly descended from the clouds. It felt a sense of deep gratitude for this moment, for the understanding that had emerged from within. The clouds dispersed ahead, revealing a vast open sky, a world of possibilities stretching out in all directions. The stork had learned that it was not the path that mattered. It was the journey itself, the ability to embrace each step, to trust the process, and to be at peace with wherever the wind would carry it next. The stork's flight had taken it through vast skies, over majestic landscapes, and into the very heart of its own self-awareness. But as the journey continued, the stork began to feel a gentle pull from below, a whisper from the earth itself, as though the land was beckoning it home. The vastness of the sky no longer seemed endless in the same way. It was now simply part of a greater whole. The stork felt the urge to return to the ground, to reconnect with the earth it had once left behind, with the same grace and ease that had defined its flight from the beginning. The stork began to descend slowly toward the ground. It didn't hurry, but instead allowed the air to guide it down, as if the world was preparing a space for it to land, to rest and reflect. The soft whistle of the wind was no longer a distant companion. It was a constant presence, now guiding the stork's descent with a gentle push. As the stork approached the land, it saw a familiar sight, a peaceful meadow. The vibrant green grass swayed gently, like a natural carpet laid out to welcome the stork back. The stork felt its wings flutter lightly, its body floating down toward the earth as though being carried on a soft, invisible wave. There was no fear, no hesitation, only the certainty of a natural return, a reunion with the earth that had always been there, quietly waiting. The ground felt cool beneath the stork's talons, and it settled on a smooth rock near the riverbank. The soft sound of the flowing water whispered around it, mixing with the chirps of distant birds and the rustling of leaves. The stork's heart, once full of questions and uncertainties, was now full of calm understanding. It was no longer seeking answers in the distance or in the unknown. It had come full circle, and now it simply had to be still. To exist in the present, the world around it felt like an extension of its own being. Its wings, once strong and powerful, now felt as though they belonged to the very air that surrounded it. The ground beneath its feet seemed to pulse with life, an ever-present energy that connected everything: the trees, the flowers, the flowing river, the air itself. Everything had come into balance, and the stork could feel its place within this great web of life. The stork closed its eyes for a moment, its wings tucked gently by its sides. The sunlight filtered through the leaves above, casting gentle patterns of light and shadow on the ground. It was a moment of rest, a time to reflect on the journey it had taken. The peaceful hum of the natural world was a song that the stork had grown to know so well, a melody that reminded it of the simplicity and beauty of existence itself. As the stork breathed deeply, the air felt like it was filling it completely, grounding it further into the earth. In the stillness, the stork found contentment. It no longer needed to seek. It was already exactly where it needed to be. The journey had taken it to the farthest reaches of the sky, but it had now brought it back to where it belonged, to the earth, to the present, to itself. The stork knew that the journey was never really about arriving at a final destination. It was about living each step, each beat of the wings, each quiet moment of reflection. The wind, the air, the earth, and the river were all part of the same circle, the same rhythm of life. And now, the stork had become part of that rhythm too. As the stork rested, its gaze was drawn toward the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky. The world was slowing down, the colors shifting from the golden warmth of the afternoon to the cool hues of evening. The stork noticed how the land seemed to breathe, how each wave of the wind and rustle of the leaves carried with it the pulse of life, steady, continuous, and deeply rhythmic. The world was in constant motion, but there was a quiet stillness that the stork had now learned to appreciate. It was no longer an observer of this rhythm, it had become part of it. The stork could feel the heartbeat of the earth beneath it, and with each breath, it seemed to sink deeper into the ground, becoming rooted in the present moment. There was a subtle pulse in the air that resonated with the stork's own heartbeat, a reminder that all living things were connected by this invisible force, the rhythm of life. The stork was no longer just flying from one place to another. It was moving with the natural world, embracing the flow of life as it unfolded. The gentle hum of the river continued to soothe the stork, and it began to sense the underlying pattern of the world around it. The wind carried messages in the form of delicate whispers, the trees bowed in time with the breeze, and even the mountains in the distance seemed to rise and fall in sync with the land's natural heartbeat. The stork had always felt the rhythm of the earth in passing, but now it could feel it deep within, as if its body had become an instrument, playing in time with the greater forces of nature. The stork closed its eyes again, listening to the world. It could hear the chirp of crickets, the rustling of leaves in the distance, the faint call of birds returning to their nests for the night. It was all part of a larger symphony, where each sound played its role, contributing to the beauty and balance of the world. The stork had found its place in this symphony not as an outsider, but as a participant, woven into the fabric of the earth itself. As the light of the sun faded, the stork felt a deep peace settle over it. The sky was now painted in shades of purple and blue, and the stars began to emerge, one by one, their twinkling lights filling the night. The world seemed to hold its breath, as if it too was resting, embracing the stillness of the evening. The stork realized that it wasn't just the land that was in rhythm, but the entire universe, moving in cycles that had always existed, each element connected by an unseen thread. The stork stretched its wings and once again felt the gentle pulse of the wind as it began to rise into the air. It wasn't a rush nor a need to move on, it was simply the next step in the dance of the journey. The stork was no longer trying to find its way, it was following the rhythm of the earth, of the wind, of the world itself. It was listening, not to the noise of the world, but to the quiet, steady pulse that had been there all along. The journey was not a race, not a quest, it was an invitation to dance in time with the world. The stork continued its gentle glide, now soaring deeper into the night. The quiet hum of the earth seemed to fade as the world transitioned into the peaceful stillness of the night. The stars above had become bright and clear, their silver glow casting soft reflections on the calm river below. The stork moved silently through the night sky, its wings cutting through the cool air as it embraced the calming solitude of the evening. It felt that, for the first time, the stork had become one with the universe, existing not just in harmony with the land, but in the quiet flow of time itself. Asterisk, the stork opened its eyes and looked around at the silent world. The land was now bathed in a soft glow, and everything, the trees, the flowers, the river seemed to be connected by the same thread, part of the same quiet rhythmic dance. The stork could feel its place within this larger dance now, no longer an outsider, but part of a continuous flow that moved through time and space, connecting every element of the world in perfect harmony. For the first time, the stork felt no urge to rush, no need to reach for something ahead. It had found its peace. The night had become a mirror for the stork's journey, reflecting the calm it had found within itself. There was no destination, no endpoint, just the continuous, gentle flow of life, and the stork was a part of it, moving with it, flowing through it. As the stork settled further into the peaceful rhythm of the night, it allowed the moonlight to wash over it. The cool air brushed gently against its feathers, the world around it soft and still. The stork's wings, once a symbol of its drive and purpose, now felt relaxed, at ease, as if they were simply a part of the natural rhythm of life. Gliding effortlessly in the calm night air, the stork closed its eyes again, letting the soft breeze carry it deeper into this moment, this stillness. It was no longer in search of anything. The journey had already given it what it needed, the peace, the understanding, and the trust in the natural flow of things. The stork's heart felt light, no longer weighed down by the burdens of the world or the need to chase after something. It was at home, at peace with itself and with the world around it. The night deepened around the stork, wrapping the world in its serene embrace. The sky, now full of stars, stretched infinitely above, a vast expanse of calm and eternal beauty. The stork rested, its wings tucked gently by its sides, the faint sound of the river's soft flow, the only sound in the quiet. Here, in this stillness, the stork felt something more profound than ever before, a deep sense of belonging, as if it was part of something much larger than itself, connected to the stars, to the earth, to the wind, and to every living thing. that shared this peaceful moment. The journey, which had once felt like a quest for answers, was now understood by the stork as a cycle, a series of moments that folded into one another, each one leading to the next in an endless, graceful flow. There was no finish line to cross, no ultimate destination to reach. The journey itself, the living, the being, the experiencing, was the purpose. And here, in the stillness of the night, the stork knew that it had arrived at a place of true peace. The wind whispered through the trees, the leaves rustling in soft patterns that seemed to echo the stork's thoughts. It was no longer pushing forward, no longer straining to find answers. The stork had learned to accept the flow of the world, to let each moment unfold naturally. It was now part of the rhythm of life itself, moving in harmony with everything around it. There was no rush, no urgency. The stork simply was, and that was enough. As the stork flew, the world below it transformed. The meadow, which had been bathed in daylight, now shimmered in the soft light of the moon, the silver beams dancing across the grass, the flowers, and the winding river. The trees whispered in the wind, their leaves shimmering as though they too were part of the night's melody. The stork felt at peace here, as if the night had opened its arms to embrace it, offering the calm it had been seeking for so long. Stork found a quiet, secluded spot on a rocky outcrop near the river. The air here was cool, but not harsh, and the world was quiet except for the gentle rustling of the trees and the occasional ripple of water against the riverbanks. The stork sat on the rock, feeling the soft earth beneath its feet. The sky above seemed endless, vast in its beauty, and the stork closed its eyes for a moment, listening to the night around it. It could hear the sounds of nature, the deep, peaceful hum of the world that came only when the earth was at rest. In the quiet, the stork felt something stir inside it. It wasn't just the comfort of the night or the stillness of the moment. It was an understanding, a whisper of truth that came softly, like the touch of the wind. The stork understood now that time wasn't something to chase. The past, the future, the path ahead, they didn't need to be rushed. The beauty of life lay in the quiet moments, and the time spent simply being part of the flow. The stork had spent so much of its journey seeking answers, rushing forward, that now it realized the answers were always in the experience in the present moment. As the stars twinkled above, the stork closed its eyes and felt the world around it, the earth beneath it, the air that flowed gently around its wings, and the sky above. Everything was in perfect balance, a reflection of the peace it had come to know deep within. The journey had given it so much, but the most important thing it had learned was how to simply be present, to experience life as it was, without the need to force it into any specific form. The stork opened its eyes again, gazing out over the quiet landscape. The river, the mountains, the trees, and the sky, they all seemed to be resting too, as if the entire world was taking a collective breath. And in that shared stillness, the stork felt a sense of unity, as if it were no longer a separate being, but an integral part of this vast and beautiful world. It was no longer a traveler or a seeker. It was simply alive, existing in perfect alignment with everything around it. With a deep breath, The stork spread its wings slowly, feeling the air against its feathers, the wind whispering against its back. It was no longer flying toward something. It was flying with the wind, with the earth, with the world. The stork had found its place in the world, not as a traveler looking for a destination, but as a being simply moving through the flow of life. Every beat of its wings was in tune with the rhythm of the world, each movement in perfect harmony with the world's natural pulse dot as it took flight once more. The stork felt light, its body soaring gracefully through the night, the stars above, the earth below, and the gentle wind at its back were all part of its journey. But now it understood. The journey wasn't something to reach or finish. The journey was simply life itself, unfolding in waves, always moving, always flowing, always. Present dot the stork flew higher, the world below growing smaller, but its connection to it never fading. It wasn't leaving behind anything, it was simply continuing, moving in rhythm with the flow of the world. The journey was never about getting somewhere, it was about becoming part of the cycle, embracing each moment with grace and trusting. The flow of life dot as the stork continued its flight. It felt the world unfolding beneath it, an endless panorama of mountains, rivers, and forests, all gently shimmering in the early morning light. The sky stretched out before it, vast and unbroken, a canvas upon which the stork could paint its next chapter. But for the first time, the stork felt no urgency, no drive to reach any particular point in the distance. There was no destination it was simply the journey that mattered now, each flap of its wings a meditation, each movement an expression of freedom. Dot the stork began to realize that it was not alone in this flight, not truly. All around it, the wind, the clouds, the earth, the stars, and every living being it had encountered in its travels were part of this vast interconnected web of existence. The stork's wings were not just moving it forward. They were part of a grand symphony, an eternal rhythm that moved through the world and the universe alike. It felt like the weight of the past having been gently lifted off its shoulders. The doubts, the questions, the longing for something more, these were no longer present. The stork now understood that it had always been enough. It had always been exactly where it needed to be. The journey was the answer, not just the destination. It was the process of living that held all the significance. As the stork soared, it turned its gaze to the horizon once more. There was no need to rush forward. There was no destination, just a path that stretched out infinitely, welcoming the stork to continue on its endless journey. The world was no longer a place to conquer or to seek approval from. It was simply a place to be, to experience, and to grow in harmony with everything around it. The stork was free, not just in body, but in mind and spirit, free to flow with the natural rhythms of life. The stork's heart swelled with gratitude for this moment, the moment when it had discovered that the answer had always been right in front of it, in the very act of living, of embracing the present. The stork was no longer just a traveler or a wanderer. It was a part of the great eternal flow of the world, moving with it, living in tune with it, always evolving, always becoming. The stork paused, letting the wind guide its flight, feeling the cool breeze against its wings, watching the world below with an open heart. It was no longer afraid of what the future might bring. The future was just another part of the journey, a journey that had no end, only beginnings. With each moment, the stork was becoming a part of the earth, the sky, and the stars above. It felt deeply connected to everything around it, and as it continued its flight into the endless horizon, it understood that this was not the end of its journey. It was simply the next step in a never-ending dance, where the rhythm of the world and the stork's heart were forever intertwined. And so the stork flew on, soaring across the sky, not in search of answers, but simply because it was meant to fly, because it was meant to live. The world stretched before it, an open canvas, and the stork was ready to embrace whatever came next. With every beat of its wings, it was home.